Khan Yunis comes as the White House has criticised the Israeli Prime Minister's public opposition to the creation of a Palestinian state. Latest reports say that President Biden has held talks with Benjamin Netanyahu today, while Washington supports Israel's campaign against Hamas in Gaza. Despite otherwise close ties, the two allies have publicly aired differences again over the way forward. On Thursday, Mr. Netanyahu dismissed the possibility of Palestinian sovereignty, saying that Israel needed control over all of the West Bank and Gaza for its security.
In any arrangement in the foreseeable future, with a settlement or without a settlement, Israel needs security control over all territory west of the Jordan River. This is a necessary condition and it clashes with the idea of Palestinian sovereignty. What can you do? I tell this truth to our American friends, and I also stopped the attempt to impose a reality on us that would harm Israel's security. The Prime Minister needs to be capable of saying no to our friends, saying no when necessary, and saying yes when possible.
Well, responding to Mr. Netanyahu's remarks, the official spokesperson for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that without an independent Palestinian state, there will be no security and stability in the region. Mr. Abbas, alongside the US and many other countries, have long been proponents of a two-state solution, saying that it's the best hope for peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is how the territories look at the moment. A future solution would see an independent Palestinian state established alongside the existing one of Israel, giving both peoples their own territory. It's the official position of the UK, US, the United Nations, and until now, Israel. So what next and how does this end? Let's go live now to Tel Aviv and we can speak to Mark Regev, who is the senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Hello to you. Thanks for coming on today. Just what is Mr. Netanyahu worried about? What does he think the danger is of a Palestinian state?
Well, he would argue that if the Palestinians have total sovereignty over the territory, then that forces Israel to relinquish security control. And as we saw on October 7th, we need that security control to protect our country. When Israel pulled out, as we did of the Gaza Strip in 2005, we took down all the settlements, we removed all the settlers, we pulled back behind what the international community calls the recognized frontier. That's the 1967 line. From their perspective, that's the border. And did we get peace? No. We saw Hamas take over, and we've seen years of terrorism, years of conflict, and it exemplified itself, manifested itself on October 7th in a very brutal way.
Well, what would security control by Israel look like then? Because the Prime Minister has already ruled out working with the Palestinian Authority, and how would it not be an occupation?
So the formula that Mr. Netanyahu has advocated is that the Palestinians should have all the powers to rule themselves, but none of the powers to threaten Israel. And the second part of that formula is indeed obvious after the October 7th massacres. In other words, let the Palestinians rule themselves, have all the powers to govern themselves, and not the powers to attack Israel. I think ignoring
How do you make that distinction, though? If you're in control of security, how does that work? Would you work alongside other groups? How would it work?
Well, once again, in the framework of a peaceful settlement, the Palestinians could run their own affairs, they could govern themselves, but it's clear they will not have full sovereignty. Israel cannot afford to allow a future Palestinian entity to sign treaties, defense pacts with people like Iran, or to have Hezbollah fighters visit them for joint exercises and operations. Obviously, there can't be a peace that's not rooted on ironclad security arrangements, and that in any foreseeable future will require an Israeli security presence. That doesn't mean
so that's the long-term aim, is it? No two-state solution. That's the long-term aim.
No, it doesn't necessarily at all mean political control over the Palestinians. Once again, we want them to have all the powers to rule themselves. It means to be realistic. You have to have security guarantees built into any sort of future arrangements. We saw what happened on October 7th when we didn't have security arrangements that were adequate.
The US is your most important ally, isn't it? We've seen constant rejection of its pleas recently from Benjamin Netanyahu and the government. Is it a relationship that you're willing to give up, that he is willing to give up?
No, on the contrary. The United States is our most important ally, and I think we're one of their most important allies, if not their most important ally in the Middle East and maybe beyond. We have a unique and very special relationship. with the United States of America.
It's not looking great at the moment, though, is it, with these public rebuttals of President Biden's requests?
So I think we should see where we do agree. We agree that Hamas must be defeated. Hamas is an enemy of peace, an enemy of reconciliation, a brutal terrorist organization. That Gaza will be better off without Hamas. So that'll be good for Israelis, that'll be good for Palestinians, who deserve better than this Hamas regime that has only brought bloodshed and poverty and misery for the people of Gaza. And we agree on that. When we defeat Hamas, and we will, we've expressed policy goals that talk about a demilitarized Gaza Strip, a de-radicalized Gaza Strip, but ultimately a Gaza Strip where the Palestinians can rule themselves. Israel does not want to reoccupy Gaza. Once again, you have to distinguish between political control and security control. In our part of the world, in this region, to ignore the security situation is to ignore realities. And there won't be an agreement in which Israel can't defend itself by itself and avoid the sort of atrocities we saw on October 7th.
Doesn't this stance from Mr. Netanyahu show that he is more interested in appeasing certain members of his party, and in fact, he's more interested in just trying to stay in power than he is anything else?
Well, I think you'd find that these calls for Israeli military security control over the territories is supported well beyond Netanyahu's natural political base. In fact, if you look at the war aims that we've articulated as a government for the Gaza campaign, the destruction of Hamas, the return of all the hostages, the creation of a new political structure in Gaza without Hamas rule, they're supported well beyond Benjamin Netanyahu's natural political base. You have overwhelming support in Israel for those goals.
There are a lot of people who are saying that they're waiting for Benjamin Netanyahu to be out of office, though, aren't there? In terms of what is going to be left of Gaza when you've finished with it, I mean, the destruction is so huge, the misery is so huge. And there are some people suggesting that the intention is to try and drive people out of Gaza. And when I say some people, that's some people within Benjamin Netanyahu's government himself have been saying that they want to encourage civilians to leave Gaza for Egypt. What do you say to the claim that Israel is basically trying to make Gaza uninhabitable?
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu just last week publicly repudiated those allegations. He said that's not the Israeli intention at all. On the contrary, once again, when this is over, we want to see the people of Gaza get a better government than they've had under Hamas. That'll be good for them. It'll be good for us.
But already infrastructure is being destroyed. Schools are being destroyed. The UN says more than 60% of homes have been destroyed. There's hardly anything left of Gaza.
So Gaza will have to be rebuilt. But let's remember, Lucy, who started this war? It's not one that we wanted. We were forced to fight this war. And Hamas is a brutal enemy. And as the European Parliament just said today, and Western governments have been saying it all along, Hamas has deliberately used Gaza's civilian infrastructure, whether it's civilian neighborhoods, whether it's hospitals, whether it's schools, whether it's UN facilities, whether it's hospitals. They've deliberately used all these structures as a shield for their military machine. As your reporter just said, the bunkers under hospitals, the possibility of hostages and Hamas leaders being positioned under hospitals. They use these humanitarian sites as a shield for their machine. So we've been forced to fight, unfortunately, but necessarily in a complex combat situation where you have an enemy that is committing a double war crime. Not only does it butcher Israeli civilians, not only does it continue to shoot rockets at Israeli civilians, both war crimes, of course, but at the same time, in parallel, it deliberately implants itself amongst Gaza civilians, using them as a human shield. That's also a war crime.
There is, of course, huge concern, Mark, isn't there, about the spread, the potential spread of what is going on. And the Arab countries have grouped together, nations have come together with this plan to try and secure a ceasefire. They also said it would help release the hostages, the Israeli hostages inside Gaza. And this plan would include the normalization of ties with Saudi Arabia, but the condition of it is that there could be the creation of a Palestinian state. Are you willing to risk that you know you would be missing out on this formalizing of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia?
I firmly believe that when this is over and Hamas is defeated, and we will have demilitarized the Gaza Strip, I think there will be room to work with Arab partners across the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, on building a better future for Palestinians in Gaza. There'll be an effort at reconstruction, which from our perspective can be Arab-led, And I think in the framework of that, we'd like to see the expansion of the circle of peace. The Saudis have not ruled that out. And I'm hopeful that once Hamas is defeated, and remember that Hamas is the most violent enemy of peace. They represent groups like, partner with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, with the Iranians. Most of the Middle East is not there. Most of the Middle East wants peace, wants reconciliation with Israel, wants to work together for the common good of the region. And I think once you've defeated Hamas, there'll be room for cooperation. There'll be room for reconstruction. And we're eager to work with Arab partners to build a better future for Gaza, a better future for the Palestinians, a better future for us all.
Okay, well, thanks very much for talking to us, Mark Regev there. Thank you very much.